I was in my mid-20s. I've always considered myself one of those kind-hearted souls, always willing to help others out in a time of need. So, driving into the city, about a 2-hour or so drive out from town, I saw a man walking down the side of the road. As I neared, he turned and, in a typical hitchhiker manner, stuck out his arm and thumb. I pulled over and asked him if he needed any help. He was polite, if not a bit shy, when he asked for a lift into the city. I gave a smile and popped open the passenger door for the guy, who tossed his bag into the back seat and buckled up for the ride ahead. We talked pleasantly for most of the trip, about friends, the news, and basically even happy small talks. I felt we were getting along well, and I even bought him dinner at the pit stop a little over halfway there. He seemed agitated and awkward when I paid, but one of the things we had talked about was money and how badly he was strapped for cash, which was why he was hitchhiking in the first place. But he eventually gave in, and we went on our way. As soon as we got into the city, he thanked me multiple times for the ride and food, and asked to be dropped off once we hit downtown. Before getting out, he asked for my phone number so he could contact me someday and catch up. Thrilled at the idea of knowing how my new friend was doing, I wrote it down for him and drove off with the warm feeling of a good deed done. A week later, I got a phone call from my driving buddy. He didn't let me get a word in after hello, and told me that I should thank God that I was raised so nice, because when he first got into my car, he was planning on assaulting and killing me once we got to the pit stop. Then that he was going to steal my car and dump my body in a ditch further down the road and go on his merry way. But after I had talked with him so kindly and treated him to dinner with a smile on my face, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't think that he could live with himself after doing that to such a nice lady. Then he said, "Please, please, Nikki, please, never, ever pick up another hitchhiker," and hung up the phone. I never got a call from him again. When I tried redialing the number, I got a payphone. When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license, so I walked most places, occasionally catching rides with friends, and less occasionally, hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those infrequently seen occasions when I decided to hitchhike, having worked late and being too exhausted to walk. Most of the time when I hitched a ride, I wouldn't get in the car with a man who was alone. Only women, unless the men were with a wife, girlfriend, or kids in the car. On this night, though, there were hardly any cars passing by, and the cold weather made it worse, until eventually I managed to signal one to stop. When he pulled over, I took a good look and figured I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness about him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into the car after we agreed on a destination. We exchanged names as I warmed my fingers in front of the heating vent. He spoke quietly, asking a few questions along the lines as if I was a local and how I liked living there. He said he'd only been there a couple of months, but found it beautiful and hoped he could find happiness there. That comment struck me as a little odd, but I brushed it off. It began to snow, and the road quickly got slippery. He slowed down and kept his eyes straight out the windshield, driving silently. I was okay with that, since small talk was never my thing. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near the intersection we were approaching seemed to be sliding, so I screamed, "Watch out!" He immediately hit the gas, flying through the intersection, and burst out, "Don't ever scream at me." I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I can get there." He didn't seem to hear me, so I asked him, Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over here and let me out." I got no response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he had been since it began to snow. To say I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of the fear that began to rise in me. I didn't know if I should stay quiet or speak, but I sure wasn't going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed he was speaking to me, so I said, I couldn't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I've told you time and again I do not appreciate being yelled at, but do you listen? No. Well, I'm done listening to you now. Do you hear that?" I was at a complete loss. I didn't know what to say in response, or if I should say anything at all. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but discarded that idea when I realized the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I began to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best. At least, I figured there was a chance I'd survive that, when he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I had gotten into the car. He blinked several times rapidly, then slowed the car, pulling into a gas station. I waited to see if he'd unlock the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or two, he quietly said, "I think I better let you out here," and hit the button to open the locks. I wasn't about to hesitate. I jumped out of the car as if it were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so sad that I hesitated. He apologized, saying he was sorry if he had frightened me and that he would never have harmed me, then asked if I'd be able to get home okay. I said I would and closed the door. He began to pull out of the gas station lot, but stopped suddenly and just sat there for a few moments with his head down. I froze, wondering what the hell he was up to, and was about to run into the station when he opened his window and started yelling at me, waving something in his hand. It was my hat. I had left it on his seat. I carefully approached his side of the car, and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, "Thanks." I watched as he drove off, making sure he was out of sight before moving on, so he wouldn't know which direction I was heading. As I walked, I put my hat back on, and a piece of paper fell out. Folded into the paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry. Please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't. In fact, it was the last time I ever hitched a ride alone. Years ago, my best friend and I went on a long trip around the southern tip of Nova Scotia, Canada. We were in Halifax, the capital city, and took a bus to the outskirts of town. Our first ride was with a middle-aged man with this East Coast country vibe who was driving a 4-door pickup. He sounded a bit concerned for us, so he gave us his business card. I didn't keep the card, but I'm pretty sure the job he had listed was pig roasting, which was a little strange. I can't remember his exact words, but he started telling us about 2 women he had picked up 10 years ago. The women were backpacking, basically doing the same thing we were doing. He said a few months later he was called by police because these 2 women were found dead somewhere in a bush, and his card was on them. He told the police that he'd given them a ride and gave them a card just in case something bad happened. At this point, I had my phone open, ready to call 911 just in case. I remember thinking, if something weird happened, I would dial 911 and they would at least hear what was going on. That wasn't a great way to make someone feel comfortable on a ride. Nothing ever came of it. He never got charged. I don't think he did it, but he could have. I don't know. I don't think we ever looked it up. I don't think it was a conscious decision, but I haven't hitchhiked again since that trip.